Hi everyone, I'm Keely Chalmers. Climate is changing, that's a fact. It's affecting everything from our health to our environment to our infrastructure. But Coloradans are resilient. Over the next half hour, you'll see stories about how Coloradans are getting creative to tackle climate change before it's too late. Something you use every day that's likely contributing to the warming of our planet, your clothes. But there is a movement to make not only sustainable, but also biodegradable clothing out of tea.
Like black tea, green tea, the hibiscus tea.
Fiona Bell is talking about tea. Kombucha, to be exact.
Kombucha is a fermented tea.
What to some might look grody looks to Bell like clothing.
I developed a biodegradable wearable made from kombucha SCOBY. And this is the SCOBY.
A leather of sorts made from the filmy culture that grows in kombucha.
Here's this whole layer that's been growing.
Bell harvests that film, that's the SCOBY, and dries it. It essentially becomes a biodegradable leather. This is a breastplate she designed out of the SCOBY.
The material itself is incredibly similar to leather, having similar strength and flexibility properties to animal and plastic-based leathers currently on the market.
A recent study out of CU suggests the fashion industry is responsible for about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Approximately 20 new garments are made for each person every year on this planet, and fashion purchases have increased 60% since 2000. SCOBY clothes would be much more sustainable.
So some of the benefits of kombucha SCOBY is that it's firstly grown, so it's a renewable resource.
Turning cultures into couture.
I'm hoping that all of this really encourages people to start growing their own clothing in the future.
Maybe not something we'll see on the store shelves next week or even next year, but maybe someday we'll all be wearing what we drink. Because the SCOBY leather is biodegradable, when you're done wearing it, you don't throw it in the trash. You compost it just like you would food waste, and it will break down in 30 days. Now, don't worry, that won't happen while you're wearing it because it needs the microbes in the soil to break it down. Now, another everyday item causing problems for our planet, tires. Every year, around 200 million tires are discarded across the country, and they pile up to become ecological hazards. But two CU Denver graduates have come up with a way to repurpose those tires.
This is a live look at some of that destruction right now from Sky 9.
You don't have to look too hard to see the ecological hazards of used car tires. You just have to peer through this thick, black smoke. The largest used tire dump in the nation caught fire back in 2020. Tire Mountain, located about 50 miles northeast of Denver, stores tens of millions of tires. Some get recycled, the rest are piled up.
That's what you're looking at here is our invention by using society's waste.
And it was the inspiration behind these two CU Denver graduates' latest invention.
So we invented what we're calling a rubber tire tile.
1 foot by 1 foot tiles made out of discarded tires that can be used as building siding, like you see here. And they do a lot more than your typical building material.
It's durable, it's water resistant, it's thermal.
It's acoustic.
It's acoustic, and these are all properties that we can utilize in architecture as well.
And it's all at a lower cost to the environment.
Sulfur and other toxic additives is what gives tire its durability.
Traditionally, when tires are shredded, that sulfur gets released into the air. But the process used to make these tiles breaks down the sulfur to a molecular level, reducing the amount of toxins released into the environment.
We have created a more green, sustainable, clean tire rubber material.
A potential way to shrink those tire mountains and improve our buildings, not only functionally, but also aesthetically.
But it's also beautiful, and it also attracts interest.
One tire tile at a time.
And keep working to create the most perfect building material out of something that is just lying in landfills.
The graduates say their goal is to commercialize their tire tiles in the near future, but they admit they will need to do a lot more research and testing before we'll see them on buildings. From buildings to driveways, concrete is all around us. Traditional concrete production pumps about 11 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every single day. But a Colorado company has found a way to make concrete that actually removes carbon from the atmosphere.
Inside this concrete warehouse, surrounded by a concrete sidewalk, a new kind of concrete is being made. A kind that could be the answer to reducing a big chunk of the world's carbon emissions, also known as greenhouse gases. This is Prometheus, a company founded by 4 University of Colorado professors who first came up with the idea inside their labs using algae. Yep, that's the green stuff bubbling inside these tanks.
We believe that our concrete emits about 90% less CO2 than traditional concrete.
And that's a big deal, considering concrete is the most used construction material in the world. And the way it's traditionally made with limestone is not all that earth-friendly.
Limestone is mined and harvested from the earth. It's then put into a kiln and cooked at about 1,500 degrees Celsius, which then emits a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere. Concrete is responsible for about 8% of the annual CO2 emissions worldwide.
But at this plant,
this is technology that we've borrowed from nature.
CO2 is actually being removed from the atmosphere.
It sequesters carbon through the same way that any photosynthetic organism does, such as a tree.
And that algae continues to sequester carbon once it's made into these concrete blocks. But that's not all it does. It also helps to make the blocks super strong, using the same process you find in nature.
The algae helps to create these biominerals that we utilize in our material in the same way that seashells and coral reefs use biominerals to make the hard shells.
In this case, the blocks will soon be made into buildings.
The company is forging full speed ahead with production. It also has some pretty recognizable investors, including Microsoft. As our climate changes, the risk for wildfire is growing. In Boulder County, they found that cows are part of the solution. It's a herd you might have heard about or maybe even seen. It spends the summer months roaming the foothills of Boulder, and it's munching to help mitigate the risk for fire.
Move over, prescribed burns. These ladies might just be the key to keeping homes in South Boulder safe from wildfires. For the 9th year, a herd of cattle is grazing the hillside south of the National Center for Atmospheric Research, otherwise known as NCAR. Their job? To eat a lot, and in doing so reduce vegetation, otherwise known as fuel for fires.
We're in one of our properties called Shanahan Ridge.
Kelly Ewing supervises the program for the city of Boulder.
Every year we bring in a herd of cattle from one of our local ranchers in Boulder County to help us with vegetation management goals.
The original purpose of the cows was to reduce invasive plants that were outcompeting the native ones. But the city now has the evidence to show they reduce wildfire risk as well. Take, for example, the NCAR fire that swept through this area just over a year ago.
We observed that in the grazed areas compared to the non-grazed areas, the fire severity was significantly less.
Where the cows had been, the fire damage was minimal, but where they hadn't, the ground was scorched.
Once it hit those grazed areas that we have, it slowed the fire down significantly.
They definitely like to do their job.
Max Karkut should know. His job is to watch the cows.
Some people call me cow wrangler, cow whisperer.
And because the cows roam on a public trail system close to homes, Karkut also encourages hikers to show the animals respect.
Well, we consider them our neighbors.
Which is exactly what Penn Richmond does every year.
And we live in the area, and we've seen about 3 wildfires within 5 miles of our house. And when the wind is gusting, we really appreciate having the cows.
A natural and sort of fun way to help muzzle future fires.
It's good to see them.
This past year, the cows were there from early May through late June. The warming climate is putting extra stress on certain neighborhoods. Now researchers are finding new ways to keep you cool. It might be cold out now, but during the summer, just how hot it feels outside might depend on what neighborhood you live in. A recent study shows non-white urban residents face more life-threatening heat stress than white residents.
How important are trees or parks when it comes to cooling neighborhoods in the heat? It's a question researchers have been digging into for years.
We're really looking at heat exposure and health outcomes.
Andrew Newman is a project scientist at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and co-author of a new study on urban heat stress, a study that found some glaring racial disparities.
Poorer neighborhoods and minority populations experience higher heat indices.
Using NCAR's advanced computer modeling, the team estimated the temperature and humidity of the air in the urban environment. That's the temperature that people actually feel. The study showed people who live in predominantly black neighborhoods are exposed to air that is about a ½ degree warmer than the city average. In contrast, in predominantly white neighborhoods, air temperature is cooler than the city average by nearly ½ degree. Now, that might not sound like much, but Newman says the impacts can be significant, especially when people in the warmer neighborhoods don't have the resources like air conditioning to deal with extreme heat.
We need to really think about how we design green spaces, how we design neighborhoods, keep the trees that we have, plant new trees, do different things to try and mitigate heat.
The reasons for these disparities go back to the 1930s, when government policies tended to cluster minority populations in dense neighborhoods with few trees and parks.
More concrete, more buildings, lower albedo, so they absorb more heat from the sun, and there's less ways to dissipate that, and so it's hotter.
All the more reason, he says, to plant more trees and build more parks in those neighborhoods that need them.
It's win-win, right? These are policies that can improve quality of life for everyone and help take a little bit of bite out of our anthropogenic climate change problem.
Newman says if these disparities are not fixed, they'll only get more extreme as the climate continues to warm. The warming climate is also impacting the trees in our neighborhoods, the urban canopy. Now researchers are using Fitbit-like devices to listen to what our trees are telling us.
There's a lot of things trees give us: shade on a hot day, wood for building, and beauty. Nothing like a lush tree-lined street. But trees can also give us important information about how they're holding up in our warming climate.
I've just been inspired to work with trees.
Since 2018, Deidre Yeager has been listening to what these two trees on CU's East Campus,
These are white ash trees,
are telling us about how they're doing.
So how you feeling?
I got nothing. Okay, we all know trees can't actually talk to us, but we can listen.
And I just had it strapped on with this mount right on the trunk.
Using these things.
I like to call it a Fitbit for a tree.
They're actually accelerometers. Like a Fitbit, they track movement in real time.
And it's even can tell us things that we're not necessarily observing with cameras or with visually.
On trees, the devices detect vibrations on the trunk as they sway in the wind.
As the mass of the tree changes, the frequency of vibrations change.
And a tree's mass depends on how much water it brings in through the seasons.
We can think about some of the changes in tree mass that are associated with disease, with extreme weather events.
Experts agree the warmer our climate, the more extreme our weather will get. So having high-resolution, long-term accelerometer data will help scientists better anticipate how those extremes will impact our trees, when they bloom, produce fruit, or how they withstand drought.
With our changing climate, on top of urban densification and urban heat, the timing of when leaves and flowers emerge is really important to monitor.
The better we understand how climate is impacting trees, the better we'll know how it will impact us.
You'll miss it if you're not visiting the tree every day, and an accelerometer can be there every day, every minute, every second.
Yeager says even homeowners can use accelerometers on their own trees to better track their health and get information on just how much to water them. It's not just the trees that will have to adapt to climate change. Some students at CU Denver are creating eco-friendly buildings that will end up far away from Colorado.
At the corner of 11th and Walnut in downtown Denver, you'll find a small construction project that will soon have a big impact some 10,000 miles away.
Pretty much a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
These students with CU Denver's Design Build program are building eco-friendly structures.
We're using 75 to 85% recycled content.
And once they're completed,
The one right behind me is the Penguin Research Facility.
they'll be shipped to researchers studying climate in a nearly inaccessible area of Antarctica. These are photos of that area taken in December of last year when the first two structures went in. Rick Sommerfeld took the photos. He also directs the program.
So they're living completely off of the grid. So we had to be really cognizant of the building envelope, what encloses it, and how to make it as energy efficient as possible.
The new buildings are replacing the old, not-so-earth-friendly research facility that NOAA scientist George Waters has worked in for years.
It's about 30 years old, and it's become pretty much uninhabitable.
He's in Denver now, helping build the new facility. Of course, getting it to the remote area on Livingston Island is not easy. Once totally built, the buildings will then be taken apart, put in shipping containers, and sent on a multi-stop trek to Antarctica.
And then from Antarctica, we actually offload it onto the Zodiacs, where it goes piece by piece to the shore, then from the shore onto the ATVs up to the job site.
Quite a job that will help climate scientists do theirs.
It makes a place where my team of scientists can do good research, right? It's a pretty gnarly environment there.
To keep close tabs on our ever-changing planet.
It's just been a great experience all around.
And give students a chance to build for their own future.
The Colorado Office of Film, Television, and Media is working on a documentary about this project that is expected to come out in the spring. One way to help fight climate change, changing the way we eat. Coming up, how scientists from Colorado are working to make lab-grown food accessible for everyone. One way researchers are hoping to fight climate change, lab-grown meat. And a couple of Colorado State University grads are helping to bring it to our plates.
To the untrained eye, or maybe even to the trained eye, this looks like your typical chicken dinner. But the way that meat got to the plate is anything but typical. That's because it was grown in a lab. This lab at Upside Foods in Berkeley, California. It's one of two businesses that have earned USDA approval to both produce and offer cell-cultivated chicken to restaurants and shoppers.
We're growing real animal meat directly from animal cells. And this is making the same meat that you eat every single day. Sure.
Eric Schultze's job at Upside Foods, among other things, is to explain how this whole process works. Instead of taking the meat and tissues directly from the animal, the company takes cells from the chicken instead. Those cells are then nourished inside this lab.
We feed the cells the same thing an animal will eat. Amino acids, vitamins, minerals, all those things. Give it water, warmth, oxygen, and the cells grow. Within 2 weeks, we have an immense amount of muscle, in this case, or meat,
And according to Schulze, at a much lower cost to our planet.
Right now, 20% of global greenhouse gases and 35% methane production comes from just animal agriculture and growing our food. And so being able to reduce any amount of that substantially is a boon for the climate.
The company says cultivated meat produces 85 to 95% less greenhouse gases than traditional meat production. Some believe it could very well be the future of food in a warming climate.
And because they do have challenges ahead of them that previous generations haven't had.
CSU science and nutrition professor Marissa Bunning mentored one of the graduates now working at Upside. She said food technology is no doubt moving fast, and there's a growing number of scientists hoping to cultivate a career in it.
They're really looking to make a difference, and they're finding ways to do that.
Right now, you can order up the lab-grown chicken at the restaurant Bar Kren in San Francisco, but the company hopes to expand to other cities, including Denver, if there is a demand. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you want to read more about any of these stories or find other climate-related stories we've covered over the past year, head to 9news.com. You can also catch stories like these every week on 9 News Mornings. Happy holidays.